Hey gang, Trevor here. Today I want to talk to you about an exam accommodation registry that we've been using at the university that I work for. Since September of last year to the end of April of this year, we have processed over 6,000 requests among a number of different staff over 3 different campuses. So we have to get fairly coordinated. A couple of years ago when I was approached about this project, it was all done by email. It was all a manual process. And we've actually went and automated this to the point where it works fairly well for us with these kind of numbers. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to share with you the process and the spreadsheet that I've created to allow us to do that. Our data is collected by a Google form, which we've put in some validation in it to ensure that we get our course numbers, our information in specific order. So there's a little bit of work that goes on into the validation part of it, but what I want to show you is where the magic really works is in the back end of the spreadsheet. When people are filling out the request, there are a number of different sections that they go through. The first of all is their personal information, then the exam information, the accommodation information, notes by the administrators, and then some automated functions using some formulas and stuff. So I have 2 requests that have come in, one from Barbara Gordon and one from Captain Underpants. They have both gone in and they've inserted the information regarding the course they want, the section number that they're in, the instructor's first name, last name, the campus that they want to write this at, what kind of test it is that they're going to be writing, whether it's a midterm or an assignment, the time of the class, the time they'd like to write, any additional information that they would like to throw in there. Now, as an administrator, I'm going to be going through here and I'm going to take a look at this stuff in purple here. So the accommodations are the notes that I, the administrator, is going to be putting in based on maybe the additional information the student supplies. Any other kind of notes I want to put in there for the people facilitating it to look at. The room number that we may be assigning to them, and whether or not this request has been approved. Now you'll notice in column V here, I have time enough to book. Part of what goes on there is we actually request that you give us 7 days notice, because quite often students will try and slip it in and say, oh, it's tomorrow, I'm just going to slip it in. What we do is we actually have formulas all throughout here. This formula takes a look and says, okay, here is the date of your exam. Here is the date of your submission. Is it less than 6? If it says yeah, if it's less than 6, then we say no. You've tried to get in and sneak it in. We need at least 7 days. If it's more than 6, which means we give them the 7 days, we get a yes. And we've gone and done that through here. I've put in some conditional validation, so if a nope shows up, it shows up green or shows up red. Now, the administrator can still approve this if they want. It's all up to them. But at least it gives them an idea if they're really busy or whatever, whether or not the student is, typically doing this kind of stuff. If they're busy, whether or not they can accommodate it. And it just gives them an idea without actually having to check dates themselves to see what's going in. So I, as an administrator, can go through and approve this information. Now, I just want to show you here the reports that we have. So this report tab is shared by all the facilitators who are going to be actually giving these exams. And so every day, instead of having to receive an email of what's the schedule going to be, they just come to this tab and they look at the reports here. Now, the report actually only takes a look at information from the form responses that has been approved. So not everything is showing up there. You'll notice there's only 4 of the items there. We actually have, a few more here. I'm just for the heck of it, this is Captain Underpants here. I'm just going to throw a Y in here. And when we go to our reports tab, Captain Underpants now shows up there. And we'll talk a bit more about this report. It's actually kind of nice because it goes and sorts everything in chronological order and stuff. So you don't have to do anything on the form responses. And this is something that I really stress a lot with people. Never sort the form responses information. That is your golden data. And if someone ends up sorting 6 out of 8 columns, which I've seen happen a number of times, your data is no longer valid. It's all mixed up and trying to figure it out is just a pain. So never, ever, ever sort this information. We can create reports that allows you to do that using the query function, which we'll talk a little bit about, but I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but there's lots of information about that. So in here, as the administrator, I'm going to throw in these notes. I'm going to approve these people here. The accommodations is because she's a bat girl and she lives in the bats. She needs low light. So I need to make sure that we turn off the lights for that. And then, of course, Captain Underpants needs regular washroom breaks. So that's all approved. Now, you can easily just work with the data that's been supplied here already. So the first name and last name and stuff. But I like to clean up the data to make it easy for people to read. So what I've done is I've gone in and I've taken this information here to allow me to put the last name and first name together rather than having them in separate fields. And I also, if you notice, watch what happens here. It's really annoying when students don't put in and capitalize their names. When you're trying to look at a report here and some people's names are not capitalized, others are, it's just very difficult reading. So what I tend to do with this kind of stuff is I actually go in and I say, you know what, I'm going to use some functions here. And the functions are trim, which means take out those extra spaces. So sometimes if people have a space behind do, there would be a space here. So I'm going to trim all the information that's in there. Then I'm going to put it in order of last name and then a comma and a space and then the first name. And then I'm going to properly capitalize it. And that's what this proper function does. And all that information and all these things, I'll put in a link to the actual spreadsheet you can make a copy of and see all that information there. But I do that for the student. I do that for the instructor. I also take the course, which when we filled it out was the course and the section, and I put that information together. So we've got some functionality that we work into here. And I also put in the row number. Okay, this is important because even though it says row 5 here, if I go over to here, this is actually row 2. So if someone was reading this and said, hey, on row 2, Debbie here is showing up. I want you to go fix that. If I went to row 2, I'd be looking at something completely different. So it's important that they have a reference number, and that's why I always put the row number in there. Because this also changes depending on the day, depending on the number of people that get in. If I reassign new people, they're going to show up here. Remember, Captain Underpants here before was 5. So this 6 here actually was 5. As soon as I entered Captain Underpants in there, this moved everything down 1. So we can't go by the row number here. We have to use the row number that's being pulled from the original. So this is how I organize that information. The next thing I do is I use a query to create this report. And if you take a look, the query here says, go to form responses 1, rows 1 through 1,000, select just these specific columns in this order. And that's the beauty about the query function, is it will go in, and if I need to resort everything, I can take the Z, put it at the end, and my row number will be at the end. Query is an amazingly strong function. I really recommend you to spend some time learning about it. So it says, bring all this information back where T equals Y. Remember I said that you have to approve it? And that's what's happening. So it's only if T equals Y will this stuff show up. Because there's no point in my facilitators looking at people who haven't been approved yet. What's the point? Order it by L. And L happens to be the exam date. So everything's in chronological order there, which works out really well. So that's pretty much how that report goes. Now, the last thing that I want to look at is filtering. When I do this way, it's going to have all 3,000 of the different people that I have. So over the course of months, we get these long lists, and there's going to be a whole whack of 3,000 of them. So I want to know, I just want to look at Alberta College or Ponoka. Let's say I work at Ponoka. I only want to see the Ponoka ones. Well, I can go into Ponoka, but I'm still going to get all these old dates as well. Because if I just do a single filter on it, that's what I'm going to get, is just that. So what I actually want to do is create a filter that allows me to say, show me what campus I'm at and show me after a particular date. And I've done that using filtered views. So what I've done in my filter views, I do 2 things. The first thing is I want to make sure I have the right campus. So I'm just looking for Ponoka. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. We've all seen that. This is the one that a lot of people aren't familiar with that's really powerful. Is when I go filter, here's the one we always see. This filter by condition is usually closed. And this is where there's some really cool things in there. So I can filter where text contains, doesn't necessarily mean exactly. Date is before, or date is after. So in this case, I'm saying I want to have the date is after yesterday. So this way, when I look at these reports, I'm only going to get stuff that happens from yesterday on. I'm not going to get any of the stuff previous to that. And I've gone and actually created these filters ahead of time. And we can see that oh, that one's not working right. I've created these ahead of time, and we can see that information showing up there. So by date, none of the stuff before that, before today is going to show up, and here's the campus that shows up. When I do none, we can see that there's a whole whack of different dates in there that should be showing up, but because we put that filter in, it's not going to show up. As an editor of this document, you can go in and you can create these filter views, which will show up on anyone else that shows up here. This is really important when we're dealing with people that we've given view-only access to this document. They can create temporary ones, but rather than make them create them every time they visit it, we can create these ones that become permanent and are available to them all the time. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to share the link with you in the video description down below. Go ahead and make a copy of it, and you can easily go ahead and customize this stuff to use your own. You'll notice here for these the automation stuff, I use copy down. So you might want to look at the add-on copy down to help you move those items down below. As people pull in new stuff, it's always going to get updated. If you want, under the approved section too, you could also pull in Formule. And what Formule will do is add an email functionality to it. So I could actually, once I've approved it, have Formule send out an email to the student saying, hey, you've been approved. Here are the date and times, and we'll gather all that information from in here of the date and times that we've approved and your conditions and any other information or instructions that they need to do. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the descriptions, in the comments there. Otherwise, enjoy.